Okay, in the second part of this series, we're going to look at our AI again, and what we're going to have it do is when it sees the player, it's going to basically chase down the player. So this is kind of perfect for the type of horde type game that we're making, where we want the enemies to kind of just locate and kind of chase the player down. To start this off, we've got to get our test AI controller, and we've got to add a new component into it. Okay, so mainly we're going to be working with the controller. We're going to be working with the behavior tree again, and we might have to do something in the player as well. So we're going to add a component, and it's going to be called AI perception. Okay, we'll just leave it named as that there, and I'm going to just select it. In the details panel, there's a few things that we have to do. One of them, it's not really set up for any perception, so it's not going to detect anything at the minute. So it can detect things like, has it taken damage? Has it seen a player? Has it seen or heard something? It's got a lot of senses. So in the senses config, you can see that in the array there's no elements. So we're going to add something, okay? And the first thing that we want to do in here is choose what we want to do. And what we want to go for is the AI sight. Okay, so you can see there's one for like team sensing, hearing, damage, that type of thing. So AI sight, we're going to go into this, into sense. And to be honest, I'm not going to change much here. I might make the peripheral vision a bit bigger, just so when we're testing, the AI will definitely see us. And then this detection by affiliation, we're just going to make sure that these are all selected, okay? By default, it doesn't realize that the player is an enemy, but we can change that later on. So another thing that you might want to change is the sight radius. So this is the length, the enemy will be able to detect the player. And then loose sight radius is once it's detected the player, like how far does it have to go, or how far does the player have to go away from the enemy to be undetected then. Okay, so I can let you kind of fiddle around with those values if you wanted to. So the next thing that we can do is when we have our AI perception, there are some events that we can select from that. So the one that we want to go for is on target perception updated. So this here small event gets basically executed whenever it sees something in its path like a player. Okay, so you can think of it like an event begin overlap, typically that we've been using in other blueprints. It's kind of the same thing. It does have a stimulus structure. Again, a structure variable is a variable that holds a variety of other variables. So if we split this, just right click and split it, you can see that a lot more kind of information comes out of this. Where did it see the player? Did it actually successfully see anything? And then what actor did it see? So one of the things that we want to do here is we want to go to cast to first person character. And we want to use the object that it sensed as our object identifier. Okay, so typically, again, what you would see in a actor begin overlap. We don't have to go through all of these here, but yeah, there's a lot of information that you can use. I would suggest like maybe looking up other videos that would kind of go into this a bit more depth. So the next thing is we want to get the blackboard okay that we're running up here. So to do that there, all we have to do is type in get blackboard. And we want to set a bool in our blackboard. We haven't set it up, and that's what we're going to do after this here. But what we want to do is set value as bool. So basically, whenever we see, or this enemy sees the player, we want to see if it has actually successfully sensed it. It's going to keep that updated, and that will turn this bool on and off in our blackboard, okay? And again, we haven't set this bool up, but that's basically what it's going to do. So if we go back to our blackboard, okay, so I'm in the behavior tree, into the blackboard, I'm going to make a new key. It's going to be a bool, and we're going to call this can see player. Okay, that's it. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to copy this, all right, because I'm going to need to actually type that out in the AI controller. So this is another thing where I think the systems between the behavior tree, blackboard, and blueprints don't really work that well together yet in UE4. So if we go back to our AI controller, you can see that it's looking for a key name. So it's basically looking for the name of this bool that we want to change in our Blackboard. And again, this Blackboard is coming from this behavior tree that we're running, okay? So just keep that in mind. That's where we're getting this Blackboard from. So what we could do is we can pull out the key name and type in make literal name. And this basically allows us to paste in or type in the name of the variable that we want to change. So again, this will kind of update, and it'll like have a true or false value depending if it is seeing the player or if it's not seeing the player. So that's the kind of first part done. So we've got this perception now. If it sees the player, okay, it's going to look at the Blackboard, it's going to set a value as a bool in the Blackboard, and it's going to come from basically this here stimulus successfully sensed. So that's going to be coming on and off basically if it sees or not sees the player. And the bool name that we're actually going to be changing is going to be can see player. So that's the first part. Now the second part, we've got to go back to the behavior tree, and we basically got to make a new sequence, okay? Where the selector basically chooses if it should be doing this sequence where it's like a random location, or if it should be doing this sequence where it basically runs towards the player. Okay, so again, we're just going to make a new selector. So I'm just going to pull out of this selector. And just as a bit of information, the way a tree works is you can see this has got a number 1, okay? This behavior tree works from left to right, okay? In that the root will follow the left path first. So this is number 1, this is 2, 3, 4, and then this is number 5. So if something doesn't work in this here, for instance, it's going to go to the next selector, and the next selector is on the right hand side. Oh sorry, this should be a sequence. My mistake. And then if we had a series of sequences or selectors, you know, it works on the left to the right basis, okay? So just bear that in mind. So we've got this sequence. What we're going to have is a move to, okay? And we're not going to get it to move to a location, we're going to get it to move to the player itself. So we can actually get that. So you can see the move to, we could select like a Blackboard actor, or we could select a location. And the cool thing about if you select an actor is it will track a moving goal for you as well. And you can allow for strafing too. I always turn that on. So we actually going to have a new task here which finds our player and stores that as our actor, okay? So we're going to create a new task. Again, when you create a new task, it's always good to rename it. So I'm going to go find player. Okay, there we go. And again, event receive. So we've got event receive execute, and then we're going to have, I forget the name of it. It's finish execute. There we go. Finish execute. So we always start with this here. We need a variable then. Again, this is going to be player. And we're going to update this here to be a Blackboard key. So basically all we have to do is get player character. So this is going to find our character in the thing way. And then we're going to get the player. We're going to set as object. And the object that we want to set it as is this. Okay. And that is it. The last thing, sorry, is we've got to tick success. Remember to do that. We're going to make this public as well. Compile. So back in our behavior tree, we're going to get that find player task. Again, it's going to ask us, hey, whenever we see the player and we set that, what variable in here do we want to set it to? We want to set it to self actor. Yeah, self actor will do. So that means then when we're moving to, it's going to move to our self actor. And then what we could do is we could probably put a cooldown on this. So there's decorators that you can put on these here. We'll go through that in a second. But the first decorator we want to do is basically check if this bool is true or false. Okay. So if we get this sequence, we can right click and we can add a decorator to it. Okay. And this here one is just basically to check a Blackboard. So it's just checking a condition in Blackboard, and the condition is going to be this bool. So we're going to go to key query is going to be is not set, and the Blackboard key that we're going to look at is going to be can see player. Okay. And the thing that we want to do with this here is basically the selector is going to be bound by this, so it can never get into this sequence. It's kind of like a branch, okay, if you think about it like that. It can never get into the sequence until this decorator has been set to true, okay? And then what we want to do is we want to notify observers on results change or value change. And what we can do is we can abort basically, if this changes, we can abort this here one, this whole sequence, and it will go back up to our selector, and then our selector decides what to do based on if this condition is still the same or if it's changed again. Or another way of doing it is we can abort all of these here. So no matter what sequence it is in, if it changes at all, it will go back up to our selector and it will decide what to do then. So I'll probably change it to abort both. And you can see that now, like it's aborting this here one, but it's also aborting our sequence on the right hand side. And that just basically means that as soon as this changes, it's going to go back up to the selector, and the selector then is going to decide which one to go down to. And it does it in a split second. You would never notice in game. And we're going to do the exact same over in this sequencer. So we're going to add a decorator. I'm just right clicking, add decorator, Blackboard. And this is going to be if the Blackboard key can see player is set. And again, we're going to have this to abort both. You can also see that on these decorators, it just gives you a generic name. So you might want to change these at the very bottom. Okay, so this here one would be like can't see player. And this one would be changed to can see player. So if we test this out now, when the player sees us in our controller, it should contact the Blackboard and say, hey, we're going to change this bool to true, which means this, when it's on its random path, should abort this, come up to the selector, and then the selector will be like, well, the only path I can go to is that we can see the player, okay, that it is set to true. So it's going to find our player, and then it's going to move to the player. So there might be some iffy results we might have to just change, but let's test it out, what we have so far. So let me find my player here. So if I press play now, okay, see, you can see me. Oh, got a bit weird there, didn't it? Is it still coming over? No, it's finding a random location again. Let's see if we can go over now. See the player, it's pretty quick. But it's following me pretty well, you know, it doesn't have any major issues or anything like that. One thing I would probably do with that though is go to the character movement. This is in the AI, and I probably would change the walk speed. So I think the max walk speed's 600. I would maybe make it 400 or something like that, not 40, 400. Just so that it's not always in our face. So you can see when it loses sight of us. And it's stopped. So we've got a bit of an issue here. Yeah, it loses sight of us pretty quickly. So there's probably a few things that we could change in that. So there is. So let's tidy this up in the next part. So one thing we can do is go to our second sequence here, and if we right click we can add another decorator, and we can put in what's called a cooldown. Basically this sequence we can make sure that it's not firing off every frame, and it has a cooldown. So it's at 5 seconds at the minute, but if you put it to 0.2 or like a lowish number, it should be fine. And what you'll find is your AI should react a lot more naturally, okay? There we go. Another thing is you might want to go into the AI perception in your task controller and turn down the peripheral vision as well. So 90 seems okay. Yeah, that seems okay to me. And like maybe 30 meters is a bit high. Like you might want to go for like, you know, maybe 2,000 centimeters, and it loses sight at 2,500, something like that. Might be a bit more manageable. So let's test that out. So again, there's probably a lot of tweaking in terms of numbers here to kind of get it working. Obviously we don't have any animations or anything like that. That might be covered in this module, or we might have to cover it in another module. So hopefully if I get, yeah, he's going to a random location. I've kind of lost him now. I've gone that far. And he sees me again. Okay, so another thing that we can do in this video is set up how to damage the player. In actual fact, I'll make another video of that there. So I'll stop this one, and in the third video of this series, we'll go through how to shoot the enemy and kill it.